What's up, YouTube? This is 82 Welcome back. So, I'm starting a new series talking on the greatest NBA teams. And I wanted to start my series out with talking about the 1971 72 Los Angeles Lakers. So, this team, in my opinion, a top five greatest team of all time. Some people have them number three, some people have them number one. But to me, there's no question they're top five. And what you got to know about this team was, so the Lakers, when they were in Minneapolis in the 50s and 40s, they had quite a bit of success. They won 5 championships with George Mikan. So they were the first dynasty in NBA history. But as the 50s went on, the team would start to just have abysmal records. And they drafted, in 1958, Elgin Baylor, who was supposed to be this Lakers savior, and he did. And I don't mean like he was their savior and given them multiple championships. I mean, he literally saved the franchise from folding. So, Elgin Baylor put asses in the seats. But it wasn't enough. They had to move to Los Angeles in 1960. A bigger market. And it was shortly after that, they got Jerry West. I think it was his first season there that they were in Los Angeles. So all throughout the 60s, Jerry West and Elgin Baylor were a dynamic duo. And they were probably one of the greatest 1-2 punches in NBA history. From 1960-61 to 69-70, Jerry West averaged 27.9 points per game, 6.3 rebounds per game, and 5.9 assists. And he was one of the first guards, him and Oscar Robertson, I'd say, that were putting up in the high 40s field goal percentage. Very efficient and tough defender. Now, from 59-60 to 69-70, Elgin Baylor, although he would decline in the later 60s, he'd put up 27.8 points per game, 13.5 rebounds per game, and 4.4 assists. So you see how great this 1-2 punch was. And they came up short quite a bit in the finals, all against Boston. So Elgin Baylor's rookie season, and 58-59, he took the team to the finals. They lost. Then they lost in 62. They lost in 63, 65, 66, and 1968. So that's 6 finals losses. And a big reason why they were losing is they didn't have a center down low to really compete with Bill Russell and the Celtics. So they ended up making a very smart move. They acquired Wilt Chamberlain in the offseason. So for the 68-69 season, I consider this the first super team. I know everybody has a different definition. Some people will consider the earlier Lakers teams a super team. But this is, in my opinion, the first super team. So you had Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, and Wilt Chamberlain. And that first year that they played together, Wilt Chamberlain averaged 20 points per game, 21 rebounds. Elgin Baylor had 24 points. Jerry West had 25. How could they lose, right? Well, they blew it. They blew it bad. And, I've covered this quite a few times, so I'm not going to go into it a whole lot. But they blew it. The Celtics won their 11th title. Well, the following season, they thought, well, it's okay. We no longer have to deal with Bill Russell. We can run it back. Well, Wilt had knee injuries, right? And he only played 12 games that year. And they go 46-36, obviously because of his injury. But, Wilt was back come playoff time. And they make a finals run. And I would say the Lakers were favored to win it, even though the Knicks obviously had a better record. It's because of the injuries that the Lakers had. But the Lakers blew it again, despite Wilt Chamberlain's 23 points and 24 rebounds, and Jerry West 31 points. So add that to another embarrassing Game 7 loss. And going into the 70-71 season, Elgin Baylor had been declining rapidly. He only played 2 games that year. And Wilt was having knee injuries, like I said, that slowed him down. So they were starting to think this team had closed its window. In the 70-71 season, they won just 48 games, right? And there was new teams starting to emerge. Like I said, the New York Knicks. And you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the Milwaukee Bucks, who won the championship in 1971. He was 23 years old. So, the narrative at the time would have been like, hey, the Lakers are old hat. Elgin Baylor's too old to play. He's 36 and can't even play more than 2 games. Jerry West is 32. Wilt Chamberlain is 34. And starting in the 71-72 season, which is what I'm talking about, they made some really smart moves. They acquired Bill Sharman as their head coach. And I think Bill Sharman was instrumental in this team's success because he taught them to play like the 60s Celtics. He kind of similar to what Wilt did in the Philadelphia 76ers. He convinced Wilt to take a more defensive role. Don't try to score so much. Get the rebounds, play the defense, throw the outlet passes. And they started out the year, actually, they didn't start out very good. So what happened was, I want to say they started 6-3. Not terrible, but not great, right? And this would be Elgin Baylor's last game because Baylor's knees were hurting really bad. And he decided it was just time to call it quits altogether because he didn't want to take away minutes from young players that had the drive that he didn't have anymore. Well, right after Elgin Baylor retires, they go on a 33-game win streak, which is still the longest streak in NBA history. And not only that, it's the longest streak in any professional sports history. And their streak is broken, actually, by the Milwaukee Bucks. And this team corrects a lot of their wrongs. They were the number 2 best defensive rated team and the number 1 best offense. They put up 121 points per game, and they held their opposing team to 108 points per game. This was a really great team. They turned everything around, and they had a then-best record, 69-13, which would eventually be broken by the 96 Bulls. And like I said, a lot of it was Sharman's coaching, but the players themselves buying into the system. So Gail Goodrich was the leader of the pack in terms of scoring. He averaged 25.9 points per game. Jerry West averaged 25.8 points per game, 9.7 assists per game. Then they had a young guy in Jim McMillan, who's 23 at the time, putting up 18 points. Happy Hairston, who was 29 at the time, put up 13 points and 13 rebounds. You had Wilt Chamberlain, 14 points, 19 rebounds, and 4 assists, and only God knows how many blocks. Then they had some sharpshooters on the bench, like Flynn Robinson, Pat Riley, Keith Erickson. This was a great team. And so they corrected a lot of their wrongs. In the first round, they sweep the Bulls, beating the living shit out of them. But in the second round, they're matched up with the Milwaukee Bucks. And I remember reading from people, I remember reading from people that witnessed this era saying that they thought the Milwaukee Bucks would still beat them. Well, It didn't happen. The Lakers beat them in 6. They closed them out. The 6th game was a pretty good game. They won 104 to 100. And to show you how Wilt really took the Bill Russell role, he only averaged 10 points per game in that series. And it's not because he couldn't score anymore. He was playing the Bill Russell role, playing the defense, throwing the outlet passes to his guards. Jim McMillan, Jerry West, and Gail Goodrich led the pack in scoring. And I think this team was very unselfish. I don't think they cared who averaged the most points. I think they just wanted to win. Kareem averaged 33.7 points per game and 17.5 rebounds, which is pretty crazy. So that's one wrong they corrected, but there was still another wrong they had to correct in the NBA Finals. They had a rematch now against the New York Knicks. And this is great because they got to correct 2 wrongs, the Bucks and the Knicks. Now, in Game 1, I should note that Willis Reed was out because of knee injury, but despite this, Jerry Lucas scored 26 points, but he was really one of the only Knicks that stepped up. Bill Bradley hit 11 and 12 shots too. I should say those are the only 2 guys that stepped up. But I want to say they got lucky with that Game 1 because they took a 114-92 win. And, one thing I read was when I was doing research on this, because I didn't live in this era, I read about some people were predicting the Knicks were still going to upset them because they thought of the Lakers as chokers, right? They always blow the big ones. Well, Game 2, Dave DeBusschere hurt his side and didn't play after the first half. And Hairston scored 12 points in the second half. And the Lakers even the series in a 106-92 win. Now, Game 3, DeBusschere attempted to play in the first half and missed all 6 of his shot attempts. He was hurting and elected not to play in the second half. So the Lakers again danced out to a 20-point lead, or 22-point lead, I should say, and won 107-96. Now, Game 4, this game went into overtime, but at the end of the regulation, Wilt Chamberlain picked up his 5th foul in 13 seasons. He had never fouled out of a game in history. He was immensely proud of that, but also on one hand, it usually led to him playing less aggressively when he was on the verge of getting his 6th foul. And this is something I've always known about Wilt, is he wouldn't play as aggressive of defense when he's in foul trouble. As the press waited for Wilt to take the floor and hurt the Lakers by reverting to a passive style, he instead came out with a shot-blocking fury that propelled the Lakers to a 116-111 win. Now they're up 3-1. Now Game 5 comes along. The Lakers won their 6th championship. They're first in Los Angeles. They beat them 114-100. And Wilt Chamberlain scored 24 points and grabbed 29 rebounds. And he won the NBA Finals MVP. Now that year, Bill Sharman was the coach of the year. Jerry West was All-NBA first and All-Defensive first. Wilt Chamberlain was All-Defensive first, and he was the shooting percentage leader. So that's their story. They finally got that monkey off their back. This must have felt really great for Jerry West. Because Wilt had already got a championship. Now, it was West's turn. It's kind of sad because Baylor didn't get the championship because he retired. But in my eyes, this is always a top 3 to 5 NBA team. I personally, and I know maybe some people are going to disagree, that's fine. I personally only have 2 teams above them. The 96 Bulls and the 17 Warriors. But this is one of my favorite teams just because of their story. I like seeing old timers come together and make it happen, It really goes to show that it's never too late. As long as you get a good system together, nobody probably thought that the Lakers were going to win it with these young teams coming up all over the league, like the Knicks and the Bucks. But sometimes it takes just a change of scenery. They got Coach Sharman. Wilt was able to buy into the system. West was playing some of the best defense of his career. Jim McMillan was starting to show that he had, deserved the starting position over Elgin Baylor. So that's the 72 Lakers. Let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for watching.